Good morning. I'm glad to see you didn't forget to grab your mandatory work uniform. These new ones are really stinking cool. Look at that. It's a tractor planting an American flag.
Is that better?
If you forgot your uniform, don't worry about it. Just go visit the link down in the description and get one. Today we're going to be doing some inspections on the 16-row planter and the 24-row planter. My friend Zach is coming down. He's going to help us look at that. But I've spent the majority of my morning in the office trying to get this lawsuit stuff figured out. Been in contact with some engineers and some soil boring people. There's a lot going on with the Bensite lawsuit. We did file one, but I don't know if I can talk about stuff yet. I just want to wait because I want to have really basically undeniable proof that stuff is wrong, not things maybe that I think are wrong. Like, I just want to have, tenured professionals say, yes, this is absolutely wrong, because I don't want to be spreading wrong information about somebody. I think we're right, like 1,000% think we're right, but I just don't want that, 0.00000000000000001% chance that I'm not. And then, I don't want to be spreading bad stuff about people for no reason. I don't want to be spreading bad stuff about people for good reason either. I just want what's fair. Anyway, we're in the Geo. Gonna head down to the main heated shop. And it's cold this morning. And last night the batteries died in my thermostat. So when I woke up this morning, my house was cold. And I have radiators, so the heat doesn't just, kick back on like that. About 6:30 this morning, Isaiah pulled in. He got a load of corn. Levi's supposed to be here in about 5 minutes, so Dad's waiting over in the dryer shack for Levi to show up. We just have corn in the bin that's closest to us now, so that's the one we're pulling out of. We have something like 40 more loads to go in for this month, so 40 semis. Look at that. We got some serious water moving right there. Just look at the soil sitting in the ditch on top of the grass. And we got big old washout. Yeah, we got some fixing to do there. I guess I'm late. Zach already beat me here. Meeting's over. Zach and I are both part of a group of farmers that get together and we share a bunch of information so that way we can learn things a lot faster. So for the sake of everybody who's paid to be in that group, I'm not going to share what we talked about, but I'm going to go over all the free stuff that anybody can find on the internet, which is honestly most of it, but there are a few secrets. First thing we noticed on the back of the planter, these black things go down to our gauge wheels. This controls the depth of the planter. What happens is we have these spacers in here that just eventually get wore out, so you keep taking them out until we have one spacer left, like right there. It should look kind of like that. One's got a bunch of spacers. But when we have no more adjustment like that, then we cannot tighten this up anymore. We should not be able to free spin this wheel like that. It should be catching on that piece of metal in the back, and when we lift it up, it should not drop like that. We're trying to figure out, is this actually wearing, like getting smaller here, or are we just losing rubber on the inside of this gauge wheel where it rubs against the disc opener? We took a micrometer, and we went to every single gauge wheel on the entire planter, and they are all the exact same size. Took a micrometer as well. Okay, on this one I used a tape measure, which is a poor man's micrometer, and they're all within 1 millimeter of each other. So we have a lot of adjustment there, so 1 millimeter should not be that much of an impact. So we ended up taking one apart, and then that's what the pin looks like on the inside. Then we took the poor man's micrometer, stuck it up there, we measured, okay, that one's about 65 long. What about that one? Huh. That one's like 69. We're gonna loosen that nut, then we're gonna slide it over just a little bit, tighten that back down, and that should give us enough room where we should have 2 or 3 spacers on either side. That bolt's just not centered. So this fro for sure needs change. That one's not terrible. We got like 3 there. And then we got 2 on that side. That one might be okay. That one's got like 5 on that side and 1 on that side. Basically every row. So we're gonna be stripping everything off regardless, so we're just gonna do it while we're there. Another big thing, these are the closing wheels of the planter. These are what close the furrow. So up where that orange thing is ahead, in front of those, the disc openers that make the furrow. These are not all perfectly centered to those disc openers. Like this one's way off to the side. We spent a solid half a day last year trying to get those things centered, and we did not figure out a very good method of doing it out in the field. So we either need to figure out a better way of being able to do it in the shop when it's folded up, or we need to find someone who has a 60-foot wide piece of concrete that we can unfold the planter on top of, set the planter down on the ground, so that way these are touching, make a little skid mark on the concrete, and then when this gets over the top of it, then we know where we need to center up that little skid mark onto, so then we know that we're centered. But until we find a piece of concrete that wide, we can't do that. So I don't know if we can mount like a string or something up there through the disc opener if we're able to run it straight back. Then how do you know you're true 180 degrees straight back? I don't know. We got some figuring out to do on that one yet. We currently have these orange rebounders on here. I noticed last year it seemed like we were pushing a bunch of dry soil from the side of the furrow in with that rebounder. So we're gonna go with a seed firmer. We're gonna get seed firmers in every row, so we're gonna need 24 of those. All of our scrapers seem good. We do need to measure our disc blades across yet. This one is good. The more we use them, the smaller they get. This one we can lose about an inch on before it needs to be replaced, so it's just over 15 inches. I believe the book over here says 14 inches is gonna be the cutoff for what we need. We wanna make sure our gauge wheels are set at the proper tension, so that way there's not a gap back where my hand is, because if there is, then dry soil can get in where the seed's at. Then if you get dry soil mixed with wet soil, it can cause an uneven emergence problem. And then with these back closing wheels, we want to make sure that they're closing evenly, because if you're closing unevenly, we could get air down in the furrow, which is also what we don't want, because that could impact seed to soil contact, which basically means our seeds are not going to come out of the ground at the same time, which is not a good thing. We need to make sure that these disc opener blades are at the right size, so that way we're creating the optimal furrow, because if they're too small, it makes the bottom of the furrow look like a little W. Then we get air pockets down there, which once again is not what we want. Our cleaning scrapers are looking good. I guess if you pull it with 10 pounds of force, that's what it takes. Or that's when they're correctly calibrated. That one feels like a lot more than 10 pounds. For this next one, I'm supposed to use a business card, but I don't have one, so I'm using Parmesan cheese packets. But if we stick it between the gap and the blades, way up in there, and then we slide it down until it stops. Okay, we're about right there. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the bottom. We're gonna slide it up till it stops. A business card gets a little further up in there, just because it's a little smaller. But we wanna measure from right there to right there. That's the contact part of the blade. This one's rocking about 3 inches right now. Wherever those lines are, that's where we put our Parmesan cheese packets. And it says, as soon as they wear out, they should contact each other on the outer edges for 25 millimeters, or 1 inch. We have 75 millimeters, or 3 inches, so we are out of spec. We've just looked at a couple rows. One was like 2.5 inches. That one was 3. So we need to do every single one. What it is, there's a spacer on the back side of this. We need to put another one in, so that way we can spread it out. That way we can lessen the contact area. For some reason, we're too tight. I don't know how we missed that, but we did. So that is not performing how it should. I don't know what kind of effect that has. The only thing we can think of is underneath, there's this little piece right there that I'm wiggling back and forth. That's called the frog. We put those on brand new last year. And they're still within tolerance of what they should be, but they lost almost 1/4 inch on them in 1,500 acres. And talking to other people, they replace them like once every 4 or 5 years. So we should not having to be replacing them after like 2 seasons, which is what we're on track to do. We just put these Yetter Shark tooth row cleaners on 2 seasons ago. They're still feeling pretty sharp on the top, so we're good there. It doesn't seem like any bearings are out on any of them or anything. The ag leader's Sure Force, working good. Don't see any leaks or anything like that. And then the Sure drives, same thing. Our electric drives really have not had any problems with those at all. Right here, we were over here. We noticed there appears to be a little hairline crack starting right there. So we're gonna need to get Cooper in there to weld that. Looks like they've done some re-welding there at some point, or somebody has. But it's cracking down below. And also make sure that's not going through to the back side. Hey, there's a grease work right there. And last but not least, our parallel arms. So there's a bushing right there, there's a bushing there, there's a bushing there, and there is a bushing inside of there. So when we set the planter down on the ground, this all lifts up. So these arms, they're called parallel arms because then they're parallel to the ground. So as the row goes up and down, these move on that bushing, it just swivels. These rows are pretty heavy. When we lift up on them, We're seeing a little wiggle in those bushings. Those bushings are what allow the row to stay true. So if we're getting a bunch of up and down action going on, that means we're not at consistent depth. And if we're getting a bunch of side to side action with it going on, then that means we're not going in a straight line and we could be knocking dry soil into the furrow and stuff, and that's not what we want to do. We just want it to be laser straight. We pulled one of these parallel arms off, and looking at these metal spots here, they do not feel wore, so that means the bushing is doing its job and it didn't get too wore. And then same with the parallel arm itself. These ones look pretty good. They still have their paint and stuff on the inside, so that means we do not have a bunch of metal on metal action going on. This top one actually maybe just a little bit shiny, but it looks pretty good. It's not an oblong hole. If these get too bad, you can put a brand new bushing on the inside of it, but it won't do any good because you have so much slop right here. If that happens, you have to send these off to a machine shop. They mill out the inside of it, make it bigger, and then they end up stamping in a hardened bushing on the inside, so then it kind of makes it new again. But ours look good enough, so I think we just need to get some new bushings. And if we look really close, they're starting to get just a little burr right on the edge. See if we got some a little more contrast in the background. There you go. See, it's getting that little burr right there. And then this one's got it too. So we need to get some new bushings. Then the 16-row planter is much the same. We did notice we got a couple of these gauge wheels. If we look right down the side, we got a little wobble back and forth, so we got something that's bent in that one. We did find a few on the other side that are a lot worse than that. When you spin them, they move almost a half an inch. Look at that guy. Whoop, 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 whoop. And like this one, we got some nice chunks of rubber out of it like that. So that means dry soil can fall into that furrow, which is what we don't want. Man, that one's chewed up pretty good. This planter definitely has a little bit more play in the row units. This planter is 20 years older than that one. I don't think we've ever replaced bushings on either planter before. For sure not that one. I don't think we've done it on this one. Just to be honest, so recently we didn't even know that those really even needed to be replaced. So we'll probably end up redoing these ones as well. I know there was a couple of them that were a little loose, which is why we figured we had slop, but if they ran a season loose with slop, that means that bushing's probably pretty shot. And then Zach noticed right inside of there, nice crack going right in there. That's gonna be a job for Cooper to get in there with his grinder, welder. He'll get us fixed up, taken care of. None of this stuff is very hard to do on these planters. It truly comes down to what do you accept as tolerable? And that's going to be different from farmer to farmer. Some guys, if it has a little wiggle, they're like, that's good for another 15 years. And then you got the next guy, if you can fit a hair inside of that wiggle, he's nope, gonna have to rebuild every single row. For us, we're gonna try to get it as tight as we can. I mean, there's a couple things like take these gauge wheels. I can get just barely a wiggle out of that. So I don't think that's enough to constitute replacing the bushings on the inside of that. But what's time consuming about this is the fact that we have to do it 24 different times. And then sometimes you have to test each thing like 5 times to make sure that stuff is right all the way around because things are a circle. So we have our work cut out for us. This planter is really not too bad to get into the rows either because there's no sprockets or any chains or anything. It's just all, you just get right into it. Besides this row. That row is not very fun to get into. 16 row, it really is not that bad either. This one just needs a little bit more attention because there's a lot of gauge wheels that have that chewing out effect going on it. So I think we can just replace that rubber. The ones that are bent, we'll probably have to replace that whole wheel. Hopefully we don't have to replace the whole wheel, rubber, and arm because we did that last year. They're like $350 a piece. So you got 2 of them a row, so $700 a row. This is gonna sound a little embarrassing. But I got into the dually to write a list, number 1 through 24, so then when I go through each row and I inspect everything and then I find out what's wrong, I can write it on the list so we can kind of figure out what we need to order. Sat down in the dually to write that, laid the seat back a little bit, I fell asleep. And it was one of those naps where I woke up and where am I? And I've been walking around for the last 10 minutes trying to figure out where I put the camera. So here we go, number 1 through 24. This is row number 1, that's row number 24. We're gonna go through one at a time. I'm gonna pull off these gauge wheels. So we'll pull the left one off first. We're gonna mark it. So we're gonna mark it number 1 left, number 1 right. We should be able to see the disc openers, then we can measure them. I need to pull the disc openers off anyway because we're putting seed firmers on instead of rebounders, so I might as well pull those off while we're in there. That will also expose this inside piece, so then we'll know if we need to slide it to the left or to the right, or if it's good. Forgot to mention, we noticed we took the tension off that, and we wiggled these to the side a little bit. Some of them had bushings that were going out in here for these closing wheels as well, so probably want to pull those apart too if we need to, if they're bad. This one looks pretty good. I got it loose and I can't wiggle it. It doesn't seem like these paint markers are as good as they used to be. See, with the 16-year-old planter, Dad greases it every time he fills it, which is like every 30 acres. So his gauge wheels come off easy. I'm not even gonna try to act like I'm the mechanic guy. That's Cooper. I've been at this for a distracted 2 hours. We got it pulled apart now. We got the disc openers off. We did take the closing system off this one. It's sitting back there. Pretty much every row has a lot of play inside there on those bushings. This is the piece that the bushings sit on. So these are just a nylon bushing. They go on something like that. And if we wiggle it around, look at that. We get all kinds of room. That's not good. And then if we look really close, we see we got a little line right there. That's a little burr. It's a good little catching point, and this side's even worse. So I think these are bad on every single row, and probably these nylon bushings. I would guess these are original to the planter. I have no idea what these actually cost, but they're shot. So we think anyway, we need to go to our Agco parts place and see if they have a new one, then we can compare side by side. The same thing with these nylon bushings. If they're not any different, then I guess we're good to go, but I can hardly believe that because there's a lot of play in these things. It's kind of like these bushings for the parallel arms. It does not really look like there's a lot of wear. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Small things do significant numbers on yields. Remember when we went through and did every single row for a yield variability test? We had like an 85 bushel best row, like the best row was 85 bushels better than the worst row on the planter. And oftentimes there's 40 bushel difference just from one row to another. Could you have weather being different 30 inches apart? Maybe, but probably not. I'd be willing to put my money on it's something with that particular row. And you look at them, they look the same, but it could be this closing wheel system being off by 3/4 of an inch. That's making a 50 bushel difference from that row. So we just want to get everything perfect. We want to get everything the same, so that way we have the most likelihood as possible to get everything out of the ground at the exact same time. And I did get a hold of Pete Youngblood. He has some seed firmers. I believe that is what they're called. We're going to be putting seed firmers on this instead of these rebounders. Otherwise, our frogs still look good yet. They have a little bit of wear on them, but they should have enough to go through the season. And their disc openers are measuring just under 15 inches across. The rows that are touching a tire or between the tire are the hardest because you got all this stuff to run into. Once we get done with those, these ones will be smooth sailing until we hit all the tire rows in the back. This is not my favorite, but I do like raising high yielding crops, and this is mandatory for us to do that. So it is what it is. We're gonna get it done. If Cooper was here, it'd definitely go a little faster, but I have to learn how to do this stuff, and Cooper's not always around to be able to help with these things, so we work with what we got. We are 8.3% done with the teardown of this planter. The first row we always do. You kind of forget how to do everything and all the little tips and tricks and stuff. So that one took like an hour and a half. This one took 30 minutes. So this one should take like 20, we'll say 20 minutes row to tear apart. I'm just triple checking everything, and I'm also labeling stuff. So like this is 2R, so this is second row on the right side. So that way we know it matches up with row number 2, and then it's the one on the right side. That way we just keep everything the same. All the parts wear differently on each row, and so if, well, in my opinion, if I take from row 1 and I put it on row 5, now I can't really pin like let's say row 1 did really well and I want to figure out what row 1 did, but I'm always changing up the components that row 1 is made out of. Maybe row 5 now becomes my row 1 because I changed some component that I had on there. I don't know, but if I keep everything the same, then it should always be the same and it should wear the same. I can't take credit for marking all that stuff down like that because a lot of other people way smarter than me gave me that idea, so. No, that's what I'm trying to do anyway. The planter is the very most important piece of equipment on our entire farm because this is what sets the foundation for a good, high-yielding environment. It puts the seed in the perfect spot. So if we do not have this set up correctly, we're building a house with a poor foundation from the get-go. We want to build as good a foundation as we possibly can. So everything we do on this, we need to be extremely meticulous and very, very picky. If anything has anything out of tolerance at all, if we feel like it could be good enough, then we're replacing it because this is a high performance machine and we need it to be running at 100% all the time. So if this takes us 3 days to tear everything apart so that way we can get everything measured and make sure everything is calibrated and looking good and the way it's supposed to be, so be it. That's 3 days well worth of time because on our farm we have millions of dollars reliant on this piece of equipment to perform well. So this is our star player, this is our quarterback. We need it to be good.